Good evening from Washington. I'm Michael Steele in for Chris Hayes. So the so-called law and order Republican Party is once again siding with lawless insurrectionist mobs. Today, Republican Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy met with the mother of Ashley Babbitt, the January 6th insurrectionist who was killed by Capitol Police after she tried to break through a doorway leading to the House chamber. And it was clear that McCarthy didn't want to talk about it.
Mr. Speaker, why are you having a meeting today with Ashley Babbitt's mother? Can you talk to us about that?
She requested a meeting.
And what do you plan to talk to her about?
She requested a meeting.
She just asked for a meeting. Is that all it takes? Because I'm sure there are a lot of mothers of young black men killed by police out there who would love to sit down with the Speaker of the House and talk about police reform. So why don't y'all just call the Speaker up and ask for a meeting? Or is McCarthy only interested in throwing red meat to the part of his base that's sympathetic to the mob? Or trying to make amends with them after he said Babbitt's shooting was justified just a few weeks ago?
One of the first things Marjorie Taylor Greene said from the oversight dais was that Ashley Babbitt was murdered. Do you think Ashley Babbitt was murdered, or do you think the police officer who shot her was doing his job?
I think the police officer did his job.
For her part, Ashley Babbitt's mother said she spoke to McCarthy about those comments specifically.
I thought Speaker McCarthy was delightful.
And I would imagine you were upset when he said that the cop who shot your daughter was doing his job. Did you discuss that specifically?
We did.
And what did he say about that? Did he stick to his, that rhetoric? Or did he change a little bit on it?
Speaker McCarthy was delightful.
McCarthy's latest stunt comes just one day after MAGA Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene announced that she would be leading a congressional visit to a D.C. jail to visit January 6 defendants tomorrow. Greene has repeatedly expressed the belief that the insurrectionists are actually political prisoners. And we know that part of Kevin McCarthy's deal with the devil to ensure his speakership involved promising Greene that Congress would take up the insurrectionist cause. But the Republican attacks on the rule of law don't end there. Earlier this week, House Republicans sent a letter to Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg threatening to haul him in front of Congress for daring to investigate Donald Trump's potential crimes. Today, Bragg's office responded, calling the Republican letter unprecedented and writing, quote, "The letter only came after Donald Trump created a false expectation that he would be arrested the next day, and his lawyers reportedly urged you to intervene. Neither fact is a legitimate basis for congressional inquiry." Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren is a Democrat of California. She served on the January 6th committee, and she joins me now. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. What is your reaction at this point to all of this coming from Kevin and Marjorie Taylor Greene involving Ashley Babbitt's mother and those insurrectionists who are now in jail?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in on the meeting between Babbitt's mother and the speaker. Obviously, this woman was killed. It's sad. I mean, she lost her life because she was trying to break in to the speaker's lobby, and at the other end of that lobby, members of Congress of both parties were being evacuated from the mob. Now, I feel badly for her. Who couldn't? That she lost her life because she believed Donald Trump. And obviously, her mother, any mother, would be grieving to lose a daughter. But that doesn't mean that the officers who protected Congress were wrong. In fact, they've been exonerated. I do think the adherence to the mob is disturbing. My colleague, Ms. Greene, should know that the vast majority of the January 6th defendants in the D.C. jail have been charged with or convicted of assaults, violent assaults on Capitol Police. That's not something that we should be celebrating. It's really disgraceful.
Congressman, just last month, Speaker McCarthy said the officer who shot Ashley Babbitt did his job. Then, after Trump went all MAGA on him, he posted posting, quote, "I totally disagree with the Speaker of the House, and Ashley Babbitt was murdered." Congressman, what in your view does this do to the body politic, certainly, but to the country when you have the Speaker trying to curry favor for Trump on a matter like this?
Well, I think it's a problem that the extremists are encouraging violence. The ex-president posted a number of tweets today, and the one I think that is most shocking, everybody knows I'm 100% innocent, including Bragg, but he doesn't care. He's just carrying out the plans of the radical left lunatics. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. So, he didn't say be violent, but he is dismissing the concept that you should be peaceful. I mean, is anybody on the other side of the aisle speaking out about that? Meanwhile, members like Ms. Green and apparently other Republican members are celebrating members of the mob who attacked viciously police officers who were defending them, saving their lives. It's just, it's really disgraceful.
Well, I want to pick up on that point because it seems a little bit odd because you and your staff have studied the January 6th insurrection as closely as just about anyone. And yet you have this Republican field trip to visit insurrectionists tomorrow in jail. How does that square with what you've learned and know about the events that day and the aftermath of all of that?
Well, we know there was a wide-ranging plot. Ex-president was the center of that plot. And when all of the mechanisms that he had at his command to overturn the election failed, all that was left was mob violence, which he initiated. That some members would embrace that mob violence is inexplicable. There are people who get all their news from so-called Fox News, who is now trying to pretend that it is just a peaceful visit to the Capitol. I, from time to time, get emails from some of my constituents who've fallen for that mistake, and I just send them back the clip of the riot. Really, we're being told, don't believe your lying eyes. Believe Marjorie Taylor Greene, believe Fox News. We're at a point where, we can have policy disagreements across the aisle. What the country can't abide is a lack of reality from one of the parties. I mean, our report was well researched. There were theories we had that we found out weren't true. So, we laid everything out, the videos, the documents, the text messages, the emails. You can read the report and see what happened. And to see people in denial, trying to mislead people and maybe encourage further violence, that's not good for our country.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Congresswoman. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, for joining us this evening. Ryan Reilly is an NBC News justice reporter who has been closely following the fallout from the January 6th attack. Tara Setmayer worked as a Republican communications director on Capitol Hill and is now a senior advisor for the Lincoln Project. Welcome to you both. So, Ryan, I'm going to start with you, my friend. What do you need to make about this field trip tomorrow and Kevin McCarthy's visit today with Ashley Babbitt's mom?
Ashley Babbitt's mom has been a pretty effective person within the Republican caucus, I would say. I see her all the time when I'm covering a lot of these hearings in federal court when a lot of these cases are ongoing. There is a significant contingency of supporters who go to a lot of these different events. I think with tomorrow, I think the important thing to focus on is just who these individuals are who are locked up pre-trial. And I think it works a lot better for them when they talk more broadly about this idea of, there's a bunch of political prisoners being held, and they don't nail down the specifics. They never want to get into the specifics. And I think that's what you've really got to nail them down on. And if you look at the specifics, you're not going to find a good poster child or a good poster boy among any people who are being held, because every single one of them has had a lot more judicial review of their pretrial detention than pretty much anybody else in America, right? Like, they've had a judge Sometimes it's initially a magistrate judge. Sometimes it's just a regular U.S. district court judge. And then, there's the appellate level. A lot of these things have been reviewed by panels of appellate judges to make sure that their detention is proper. And, the majority of those people who are being held are on video captured in multiple angles, assaulting members of law enforcement. You can see it. It's pretty much like, the NFL, you can swipe around and see any angle you want. That's what you can do with a lot of these individual crimes. And they're brutal crimes on law enforcement officers that are captured on tape. And of course, we should respect the idea that people aren't convicted yet. But we should also just look at the evidence and look at what judges have seen. And I should say also that, 9 out of, I think, 20 of them are convicted, right? So set those aside. They've already been convicted. Let's focus on the 11 then, right? Most of those people also have been on tape, on videotape, multiple angles assaulting law enforcement. So
Tara, Ryan raises the baseline point here is that there's nothing to see. There is no, wild activity involved here that's out of the norm of processing these individuals who are on tape committing a crime. We've both worked in Republican politics for a long time and know well how to create the political spin. So from where I'm sitting, this looks a lot like pandering to that MAGA base, creating the spin and ginning up noise around something that they know is not a good idea to gin up the noise around.
What the hell is Kevin McCarthy doing meeting with Ashley Babbitt's mother? What is Marjorie Taylor Greene doing lionizing these MAGA malcontents? These people are treacherous people. They try to engage in an insurrection to overturn our government, a free and fair election. They are not patriots. They are criminals. They are treasonous. They are despicable. And Kevin McCarthy, once again, has demonstrated that this blood oath that he has taken with these MAGAs is more important than upholding our Constitution and any semblance of respect that he has for the oath of office that he's taken. Ashley Babbitt was not murdered. Ashley Babbitt was part of a violent mob that was trying to overturn a free and fair election in a coup. And the police officer who had to make the difficult choice of using his weapon was put in that position because of Ashley Babbitt's decision to be a part of a violent insurrection mob. So this whole lionizing her and this the conspiracy theory taking over of the Republican Party, amplifying them and giving them the time of day of the Speaker of the House, who is second in the line of succession for the presidency, whose oath of office should be to the Constitution and upholding the Constitution, not to MAGA malcontents. And how dare he? That he spits in the eye of the law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line that day to protect him and his cowardly ass and the rest of them who are now amplifying MAGA. There is something really wrong with that. And I hope that people do not become desensitized to the fact that this is disgraceful and disrespectful to anyone who was part of that mob who protected them from that mob, the law enforcement officers. McCarthy didn't even have the courage to meet with some of the family members of those law enforcement officers who were hurt. And the ones that he did, he was so dismissive of them, it was offensive. So it is just outrageous to me that the Speaker of the House would give the time of day to these people, and that Marjorie Taylor Greene, well, she speaks for herself.
Ryan, you report that, quote, there are just 3 defendants held at the D.C. facility who are not charged with physically assaulting law enforcement officers on January 6th. One of them, William Crestman, a member of the Proud Boys, is being held because a judge determined that there is overwhelming evidence in support of the case against him and that he's a flight risk. What more should we know, and do you know about these individuals, that 11 that you referred to that are right now in jail?
Yeah, I think, one of those 3 I think is interesting to look at is Eric Christie. Now, he's an individual who was from California and came out to D.C. and was captured, I believe, on top of a police vehicle with a hammer hanging out of his belt. Now, he never entered the Capitol that we know of, and he was actually originally charged with misdemeanors. And on the basis of that, that's not something you would expect him to be held for. But here's why he's held. It's because they tried to serve a subpoena on him. He did not take that subpoena. Mm-hmm. Then they arranged something where they would have the California Highway Police pull him over on the side of the road, and that's how they would take him into custody. Guess what he does? He runs, right? He takes off. He flees that stop, right? So then finally they have to show up to his house, right? The FBI SWAT team has to come in. This is the way we have to do it. And then you'll have all the claims of overreach, right? But so that's what they have to do it. They show up. He barricades himself in his apartment for hours as there's a standoff outside of his home. And eventually FBI has to go down the door. At one point he said, you better come in here with guns, right? And he had weapons inside. So this is not a man he wouldn't have been held had he had not been for that conduct, but he's shown disrespect for the rule of law. He's shown that he can't be held accountable, and that's the reason that he's being held pre-trial.
And that's the individual that the Congresswoman wants to visit tomorrow. Ryan Reilly and Tara Setmayer, thank you very, very much. Appreciate you. Coming up, in the face of criminal indictment, Donald Trump does what he does best. Posts about it on social media, of course. He sounds rattled, but is he? We'll talk to George Conway about it next. Well, we are now 2 days past the date on which Donald Trump claimed he would be arrested, and it is not clear when or if the Manhattan District Attorney will actually bring charges against the ex-president in his investigation of the hush money payment Trump made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. But that arrest announcement has borne fruit, for the Trump campaign coffers, that is. The ex-president has raised $1.5 million in the 3 days after he claimed on Truth Social that he'd be arrested Tuesday. And now Trump is planning a victory lap this weekend. He will hold his first campaign rally of the year in Waco, Texas, during the 30th anniversary of the deadly siege there. So, despite what you may see in the headlines, I don't think that the ex-president is panicking. I think this is all part of the same old usual Trump shtick, where he turns the narrative around in his favor to further his objectives, and make a little bling on the side. You have to remember, Donald Trump ain't normal, and there ain't nothing normal about any of this. Joining me now is George Conway, prominent conservative attorney and former Republican. George, it's good to see you, my friend. What do you make of all of this? Is Donald Trump panicking, or is this all a part of the shtick that I think it is?
Well, I think those two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. As you say, he's not a normal man. He is a narcissist, a pathological narcissist, a malignant narcissist, a narcissistic sociopath. You can use any of those terms interchangeably. He is panicked and terrified. And narcissists live in panic and terror that their true selves, their true inadequacies will be revealed to the world. So they create this false image of themselves, and they lie and they brag and they say things about themselves that aren't true, to e.g. George Santos. And at the same time, they want to make themselves the center of attention. So yes, he is absolutely putting on the old shtick of trying to get as much attention as possible and trying to raise money off of it and get the grift off of it. But the fact of the matter is, he is terrified, and you can see it in his truth social media posts, which have taken, they're insane to begin with, but they've taken a whole new level of extreme nuttiness. These all-caps tweets. I mean, tweeted something today where he had they juxtapose a baseball, him holding a baseball bat next to a picture of Alvin Bragg. I mean, it's something that could get his bail revoked someday. I don't know. So he's because of his, he is a severely disordered personality, and he's not very smart. And what he's doing here is just instinctive. He lashes out because he feels he's being attacked. He feels he's being humiliated. But at the same time, he's going to put on a show to basically to gin up his followers. And that's what the danger is here, is that he will keep doing this over a period of several months, of a period of the next year and a half. I happen to think he's going to get the Republican nomination, and he is going to try to foment violence as he did on January 6th. He's not going to do a very good job of it this week. It's just a little too early for that. But if he keeps pounding on something for months, which he's going to be unless the judges put gag orders on him, you'll see people starting to try to do things like they did 2 years ago, sadly.
So, on this idea of Trump panicking, which is, you're right, two things can happen at the same time. I can panic and raise some money. You have Trump referring to and calling out the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, today as a danger to our country who should be removed immediately, and said he's doing the work of anarchists and the devil. To me, that's Trump. Some say he's flailing, at least a little bit. I think some of this has gotten under his craw because he doesn't have the power structure behind him to really fight back. How do you interpret those types of messages coming from him?
Well, he is flailing, and it is Trump. Trump is a continual flailer. He's flailed his entire life. He's flailed in and out of bankruptcy. He flailed in the 2016 election. He flailed throughout his presidency through 2 impeachments. He just lashes out and externalizes everything because he can't look inside as a narcissist. He can't view his truthful self and look at himself truthfully. And that terrifies him. So he externalizes everything and attacks everyone and everything that doesn't do his bidding. And that's just his nature. It is him flailing about, but it is also pure Donald Trump.
So Trump is heading to Waco this weekend, and during the anniversary of the siege that the right-wing militia groups hold up as evidence of tyrannical government outreach, the message is clear. Don't you think? I mean, for him to go there, knowing what that stands for, what is the message you think Donald Trump is signaling to the Proud Boys and other anarchist types out there who want to see harm come to the government?
Well, I feel bad for the people of Waco because I'm sure there are many, 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 many nice people who live there. But, he is absolutely trying to gin up the extremists. And he absolutely is saying that. He's talking the language he's using in these all-cap truths on Truth Social are talking about taking back the country and about basically that the real criminals are the prosecutors, saying all sorts of things like that. And he is absolutely going to, he's going to trigger some of these people. And then he's going to say, these are the things that happen when people do bad things to me. I didn't do it. Classic narcissistic abuser lines. And you made me do this to you. And you made these people do this to you because you're being because you're being mean to me.
All righty. Well, you've got a lot of Texas Republican leadership that aren't showing up in Waco, so maybe he is flailing. George Conway, thank you very much. Appreciate you, man. Still ahead, the former president ramps up his intimidation efforts as the Manhattan prosecutor makes us wait until next week. What we know about what's happening in the DA's office coming up next.
Each week on Why Is This Happening?, MSNBC's Chris Hayes is joined by uniquely qualified guests to dig deeper into today's most pressing issues and ask, why is this happening? And fans are loving what they're hearing.
I love that Chris isn't afraid to not know the answer to the things he's asking about.
I've listened to so many that have made me cry and some that have, they make me laugh.
Whenever his wife, Kate, is on, because she's brilliant and he can't stop showing just how obsessed he is with her, and I love it.
I've received both of my vaccines plus my booster, but it's in fact the Chris Hayes shot in the arm I receive each week that I am convinced keeps my mind and body running smoothly.
I like to use WithPod as a zero-commitment book club.
Why Is This Happening? The Chris Hayes Podcast. New episodes every Tuesday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Jen Psaki. I know from the years I've spent on campaign buses, in foreign capitals, and in the Oval Office that there is always more to a story under the surface. On my new show on MSNBC, we're going to bring you inside all of it, breaking down the truth about the things that matter and visiting with some of the most fascinating people in the news today. So I hope you join me every Sunday at noon Eastern on MSNBC for Inside with Jen Psaki.
Today, lawyers for both former Vice President Mike Pence and ex-President Donald Trump appeared before a federal judge in Washington, D.C. They presented arguments in the ongoing debate over whether Pence must comply with the subpoena from special counsel Jack Smith and testify about Trump's actions around January 6th. The former vice president claims that he should be immune from the subpoena because he was acting as president of the Senate on January 6th rather than as a member of the executive branch. And lawyers for Trump are arguing that Pence is protected under executive privilege. At the same time, one of Trump's lawyers, who was present at the hearing today, has also been fighting an order to testify against Trump. Evan Corcoran lost his bid in appeals court this week and is expected to testify in the case about Trump's handling of classified documents as soon as tomorrow. Glenn Kirschner served as federal prosecutor for 30 years, including his time as an assistant U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. And Karen Friedman Agnifilo, I was going to mess your last name up, Karen, I apologize. Agnifilo, sorry.
That was perfect.
Thank you. As Chief Assistant District Attorney in the Manhattan DA's office under Cy Vance, both join me now. My apologies again to you, Karen. Glenn, what do you make of these developments as they're unfolding, as we've seen this week in Jack Smith's investigations, for example?
You know, Jack Smith seems to be going scorched earth. You know, he is fighting hard for accountability, you know, not only trying to secure the testimony of Mike Pence, and he will succeed. Mike Pence will see the inside of a grand jury room, and he will be compelled to testify because his attempt at asserting these privileges will fail. And then equally dramatic is Jack Smith's attempt to basically flip Donald Trump's own defense attorney, Evan Corcoran, against him, because it looks like, according to a finding by Chief Judge Beryl Howell, that Donald Trump was using Evan Corcoran in furtherance of committing crimes. So the only remaining question, Michael, is, was Evan Corcoran complicit in the crimes, or was he being used unwittingly? If unwittingly, he has no Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. If he's complicit, he will plead the Fifth, and then Jack Smith will have a decision to make. Do I immunize Corcoran and compel him to testify about the crimes of Trump, or do I prosecute Corcoran? That piece is probably one of the underreported sides of this, because everyone's focused on the DA, but that storyline could have some real dramatic effects starting tomorrow. And Karen, speaking of that DA's office, that Manhattan DA's office, what do you think they're going through this week? The former president sort of jump-started this whole thing by saying, I'm going to be arrested on Tuesday. And the DA should be the one that makes that announcement, right? So how do you see this playing out for them, and what are they thinking right now?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is the District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office. They're trying to decide whether or not they need to put on another witness, a rebuttal witness to Bob Costello, who testified in the grand jury earlier this week, because Bob Costello raised some points on behalf of Donald Trump. And you want to make sure that you shore up any doubt or any questions that were raised by him. So I think they're considering whether or not they want to put on a rebuttal witness. They're even thinking about whether or not to indict. I mean, this has never been a political prosecution, despite what Donald Trump thinks. And this is always about seeking the truth and following the facts wherever they lead. And the third thing I think that they're also looking at is when he will surrender, if there is an indictment. And for security reasons and law enforcement reasons, you don't want too much time between an indictment and surrender, because that information will leak largely from Donald Trump, and he'll try to gin up his supporters into violence, because that's what he does. That's what he did Jan 6th. That's what he'll do here. That's why he said, I'm being arrested Tuesday, even though he knew he wasn't. He was trying to get people to protest and just put pressure on the DA's office not to indict him. And I think he was also baiting the DA's office, frankly, to tell him when this is going to happen by saying it's going to be Tuesday. So that's what I think is happening this weekend. And I think for security reasons, they're waiting until closer in time to when he would surrender.
Yeah, bring the temperature down a little bit as well. So, Glenn, what do you expect the special counsel may be hoping to learn from Corcoran's testimony in the Trump document case?
Well, he may very well learn that Donald Trump obstructed justice and basically lied to the federal government, committing what we call a 1001 false statement. And, look at the parallels, Michael. You've got up in New York, Donald Trump's former lawyer testifying against him. Down in D.C., you've got Donald Trump's lawyer testifying against him. And you know what? Evan Corcoran probably doesn't have all of the baggage that Michael Cohen has. I think he can overcome it with corroboration. But, if a former federal prosecutor, Evan Corcoran, has the goods on Donald Trump, if Donald Trump used him as a pawn to unlawfully retain those documents at Mar-a-Lago, boy, Donald Trump is sunk.
Mm-hmm. And Karen, we're going into next week now with the DEA's office and the grand jury convening on Monday. What do you expect? How do you expect that to go? And what should we be expecting once they convene on Monday or maybe Wednesday?
Yeah, so this is a grand jury that's meeting afternoons, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. It's a special grand jury, and it's hearing more than one case. And so on Monday, it may or may not hear this case. And if it does, they may or may not hear from another witness. I think they're going to determine that over the weekend and decide whether or not they want to put someone else on. And the next thing that happens after that, I think, is they would, if they've decided to ask the grand jury to vote on the case, they will charge the grand jury on the law and ask the grand jury to vote. And then they will have an indictment. If he is indicted, they will have a physical indictment, and it'll say the people of the state of New York versus Donald Trump, not Alvin Bragg versus Donald Trump, because this will mean that a majority of those 23 New Yorkers found that that Donald Trump committed a crime and that he should be charged with a crime.
All righty. Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, and Glenn Kirschner, thank you both very, very much. Appreciate you. Still to come, the congressional clock is going tick-tock for the Chinese social media app. But is the party about to stop? Next.
There comes a point when a singular event shapes our future, broadens our perspective, and marks a crossroad in our cultural landscape. The Turning Point, an original documentary series from MSNBC Films and executive producer Trevor Noah that explores these watershed moments for the biggest issues of our time and asks how we got here and where we go next. The Turning Point documentary series on MSNBC and streaming on Peacock.
MSNBC Films presents a new 6-part original series from NBC News Studios, hosted by John Leguizamo.
I wanted to do a show where people watch this and go, I want to be Latino. And you can't tell Latino stories without plenty of good food, music, and dancing. So come on, let's go, let's go.
Leguizamo Does America, beginning Sunday, April 16th at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC and streaming on Peacock.
There was rare bipartisan consensus today on Capitol Hill as members of both parties grilled the CEO of the social media platform TikTok. For nearly 5 hours, lawmakers were almost uniformly skeptical on how the data privacy and security is handled by TikTok and its China-based parent company, ByteDance.
And while TikTok videos provide a new fun way for people to express their creativity and enjoy the videos of others, the platform also threatens the health, privacy, and security of the American people.
Has ByteDance spied on American citizens?
I don't think the spying is the right way to describe it. Congressman, I have seen no evidence that the Chinese government has access to that data. They have never asked us. We have not provided.
Well, you know what?
I
find that actually preposterous.
American data has always been stored in Virginia and Singapore in the past. And access of this is on an as-required basis by our engineers globally. By engineers for business purposes.
By engineers?
This is a private company.
ByteDance?
ByteDance.
The Communist Party?
No.
Alexandra Levine is a senior writer at Forbes covering technology and society, and she joins me now. Alexandra, didn't seem like any lawmakers were convinced by CEO Shou Chew today. What did you make of the hearing, and how did he do?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the really long, months-long charm offensive that TikTok had deployed, both, with lobbyists, with lawyers, with journalists like myself, who they actually invited to their transparency center that they recently opened in Los Angeles, all of that was aimed at really fending off this chilly reception. And I think it really did not work. I think what you saw when you watched the hearing today with the TikTok CEO is that a lot of the lawmakers just seemed to have made up their minds about how this was going to go before he even, stepped foot in the room or sat down in the seat.
It seems like the CEO was asked as well about some of your reporting. Let's take a listen to that.
A current TikTok employee told Forbes that nearly anyone with basic access to company tools, including employees in China, can easily look up the closest contacts and other sensitive information about any user. Why would a current TikTok employee say this if it wasn't true?
This is a recent article. I have asked my team to look into it. As far as I know, we have rigorous data access protocols. There's really no such thing.
He disputed the conclusions of your article. How do you respond to that?
He did dispute the conclusions of the article, but we are very confident about what we reported, and we're very confident about our sourcing. The focus of the story was about India, which banned TikTok almost 3 years ago. The app has not been accessible there since basically the middle of 2020. But what I found in this investigation is that company-wide employees at both TikTok and ByteDance in both the US and China can still access past user data from users from India. The Indian government, the requirement once they banned the app was that everything would stop moving forward. But there's a lot of questions around what the company is doing or why it has retained all of this user data from Indians from the past. And so I think that, zooming out, though, part of the reason why it's such an interesting story is because there's so much conversation now about banning the app in the US. Mm-hmm. And I think it raises a lot of questions about what does a ban actually mean and what can a ban do versus what can it not do, and what happens to all of the American user data that has already, been collected by TikTok and its parent company that's based in China.
So let's pick up on that point and try to answer some of those questions. Is there a case to be made against banning TikTok, and what impact would a ban have on society as a whole?
Well, I think that you're starting to hear sort of a louder chorus of voices talking about why a ban may not be the best way forward, both because of what it could mean for people living in the U.S., but also what it could mean for national security. CFIUS, the Biden administration through CFIUS is asking TikTok at this point to divest from its parent that's based in China, ByteDance, or basically face a ban. And there's a lot of conversation about how if there were a consensual CFIUS agreement between TikTok and the Biden administration, that the U.S. government might actually have more agency to be able to set the terms of what happens to data, both past and present, and that it also could just afford more protections than just blanket banning the app might.
Alexandra Levine, thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Coming up, as Donald Trump pummels top contender Ron DeSantis into submission, what's a never Don, never Ron Republican to do? Next. Donald Trump isn't holding back when it comes to Ron DeSantis. He released a surprisingly policy-oriented attack yesterday where he criticized the governor's record in Florida, including the state's COVID death rate, its education rankings, and crime. But while Trump and DeSantis dominate the polls right now, there are voters who aren't that into either of them. And the other presidential hopefuls are hoping to snag just a bit of the never Don, never Ron crowd. Jonathan Capehart is associate editor at The Washington Post and the host of the Saturday and the Sunday show with Jonathan Capehart on MSNBC. Tim Miller is a former spokesman for the RNC, my old haunt, and former communications director for Jeb Bush 2016 campaign. He is now a writer at large for The Bulwark. Both join me now. Gentlemen, welcome. Jonathan, let's start with you, my friend.
This is wild.
This is wild.
This is
just a little bit different.
Just a little bit different. I'm used to sitting over there. This is my studio.
I know. It looks good. All right. What do you think? How do you like what I've done with the place?
It's lovely.
So, is there room for this emerging no, I don't like Ron, and no, I don't like Don Republican? Where is that a thing? Is it real, or is this just something that's made up?
This is a question I'd ask you, Mr. former chairman of the RNC. But you know what? I think some of these people who are thinking of running, who aren't Ron or Don, they're hoping for that. But come on, we've looked at the polls over the last few weeks. Donald Trump is gaining in support. He's raising money hand over fist over that insane social media post that he put out last Saturday. Nikki Haley, who is the only other person declared in the race other than Donald Trump, she's mired in the low single digits. I mean, you would think that she would be someone who could get the neither Ron, neither Don crowd, but clearly she's not gaining any traction. So, no. Also because Donald Trump, he's the man to beat.
He is. He is.
Period.
And folks haven't seemed to figure that part of it out yet. So Tim, to the point that Jonathan just raised about Nikki, you've got Haley and Pence both trying to conflate Trump into this, and Ron DeSantis for that matter, into this thing, right, that everyone doesn't want to be a part of. How successful is that attempt going to be, do you think?
Not that successful, I don't think. Look, I think that, Nikki's probably feeling kind of wan while we're rhyming here. Look, Michael, you know this. The party wants MAGA, right? So if you want to be never Don or never Ron, you've got to offer a different version of MAGA. And I do think that that's possible, that someone could emerge and do that. But you can't have the scent of an old Michael Steele, Tim Miller style Republican. And Nikki, right, despite the fact that we disagree with what she did, that's not what the primary base wants right now. And so I think that if DeSantis fades, which is possible, or if Trump goes to jail, which is possible, someone else could emerge for sure. I'm not saying it's just a two-man race like Jeff Rowe said, but I think for now it's a two-man race. And to beat them, you've got to offer the MAGA voter something else. Maybe it's an optimistic MAGA vision, or maybe it's even a darker MAGA vision. I don't know. But it can't be, we're just going to go back to the good old days. The voters aren't interested in that.
They aren't interested. And so that may explain a little bit of the tack, Jonathan, that DeSantis took when he came out and started talking about Putin in such basically flowery language, and saying, oh, yeah, this was just sort of a political dispute and territorial dispute with Ukraine, but then had to backtrack on that when Republican senators said, oh, hell no, it isn't, right? This is something different. How do you think he navigates this space? How do you think he dresses up to look presidential, straddling these two lanes that he's trying to merge into one?
Well, straddle is a very good image because he split his pants on this. I mean, he said what he meant. Nina Leakes, I said what I said. He meant what he said the first time.
He did.
And then the establishment came out, the folks who Ron DeSantis actually thinks he takes them seriously. George Will said to me last week on First Look that what Ron DeSantis said the first time was disqualifying. And so if you've got MAGA world saying Putin's our buddy, and you've got the establishment saying you can't say that because it is wildly irresponsible. Right. And so now he's trying to tack and have it both ways in the way that Mike Pence is trying to have it both ways when it comes to Trump, incited the insurrection, but stop picking on him.
Right.
And so I don't see how Mike Pence is able to do what he's going to do. He's trying to do. And I don't see how Governor DeSantis, is going to be successful in this. I just don't see how he threads this needle.
So, Tim, you have former Republican Congressman David Jolly tweeting out yesterday about Trump's attacks on DeSantis this way, quote, "This is the message many have failed to deliver, but Trump uniquely can. Florida is now the least affordable state in the country. Education ranks poorly. There's an insurance crisis. Guns are on the rise. And DeSantis's unsteady COVID strategy led to significant loss of life." This from a fellow Floridian. Is this a good thing at this point? At this point in the race, to sort of position DeSantis the way Trump has, to sort of create this narrative around him before he really gets the energy and the momentum going?
I think it's a little bit risky because if it doesn't work, I think that could make DeSantis stronger. But here's the thing. It's always worked for Donald Trump. So why would Donald Trump worry about that risk? Here's what he's going to do. He's going to go for the jugular. He's throwing the whole kitchen sink. Yesterday's bleat, or whatever he calls them, was policy heavy. The one before that was like calling DeSantis a groomer. He's going to go personal. He's going to go policy. He's going to attack his family. And if all DeSantis does is kind of, take a little pillow and have a pillow fight back over on Piers Morgan, that's not going to work. We all lived through this in 2016. We see what happens here when one guy's going for the jugular and the other person is trying to subtweet. Like, that strategy doesn't work.
Yeah, those subtweets that get you every time. Tim Miller and Jonathan Capehart, whose show airs right here every weekend morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Thank you both Gentlemen, appreciate it.
Chairman.
That is all in on this Thursday night.
The battle over a woman's right to choose, global economic challenges, the ongoing threat to democracy. When you sign up for the MSNBC Daily Newsletter, you're signing up to have a deeper understanding of today's biggest issues. Every morning you'll get insightful articles sent directly to your inbox, written by people you know and trust, like Hayes Brown and Mehdi Hassan, along with video highlights from your favorite MSNBC shows. Sign up for MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.